this place. Lord, just lend us your Spirit this morning that we might have eyes to see what it is we need to see, ears to hear what we need to hear, and a heart to receive it. Lord, just thank you for this place. Thank you for this body of Christ that we all belong to. And we just ask that we all be lifted up and raised up, that we might be a light to the people around us. And we pray that in Jesus' name. The incident that took place, I believe it was New Zealand. I gave up news for Lent. Right? I actually removed the news feed from my phone, so I cannot look at it. And, you know, I don't watch TV news or anything like that. I just happen to hear about it from other people. And while we're talking about what we're talking about today, I want you to kind of keep that in the back of your mind, what happened. You know, somebody with some misguided views went off on some people because they didn't have the same beliefs. And believe me, I'm not advocating for Islam. All right, that's not what I'm doing here. What I'm saying is somebody with misguided beliefs can go off and hurt people for the wrong reasons. Okay, that being said, play that video.
This man ceaseth not to speak blasphemous words against this holy place and the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth shall destroy this place and shall change the customs Moses delivered us.
Are these things so?
Ye stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears, ye do always resist the Holy Ghost. As your fathers did, so do ye. Which of the prophets have not your fathers persecuted? And they have slain them which shewed before the coming of the just one, of whom ye have been now the betrayers and murderers, who have received the law by the disposition of angels, and have not kept it. Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Lord, lay not this sin to their charge.
That scene that we were just watching, Stephen bared witness in front of the Sanhedrin. He was dragged in front of the Sanhedrin, and he basically told them, he's like, you guys are ridiculous. You know, the Spirit is talking to you, and you're stiff necks, you won't listen. The Spirit is telling you what's going on, and you don't want to hear it. And all he does is he makes them very angry, and they drag him out of town, and they stone him to death. And when they stoned him to death, all of the religious elite that were witnesses, they laid their robes at the feet of a young man named Saul. Okay, this was out of respect for Saul. They had high hopes and expectations of who he was and what he had been raised to be. Now think about this for a minute. Imagine somebody, this may not be the best message for him to be listening to. I mean, Now imagine somebody hating you so much for just a small difference in your belief system. I mean, the Jewish people and the Christians, their views were not that far apart. But yet, if you spoke about what you believed, they would kill you. They would drag you out of your home. They would tie you up, male or female, drag you out of your home, take you out of town, and stone you to death. Imagine that. And this guy, Saul, this is the guy that's my hero. Think of that. All right, continuing on the unlikely heroes, and here's one of my favorite characters from the Bible. At this, they covered their ears and yelling at the top of their voices, they all rushed him. They're talking about Stephen here. Dragged him out of the city and began to stone him. Meanwhile, the witnesses laid their coats at the feet of a young man named Saul. When they did this, this was a sign of respect. They were saying that this is going to be one of our new leaders. This is the guy that's going to keep our religion clean, pure, and he's going to make sure that these Christians go away. Acts 8:1, and Saul approved of their killing him. On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church of Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Meanwhile, Acts 9:1-2, meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciple. He went to the high priest and asked for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. And when you got taken as a prisoner to Jerusalem, you were brought before the Sanhedrin, and you had a choice. You could say, I don't know what he's talking about, or you could say, no, I believe in Jesus Christ as my Savior, and get yourself stoned, killed, crucified, all manner of different things that they would do to you because of your belief. All of this was going on. There was a leadership vacuum. In other words, there was a problem in the leadership in Rome. This was between, I'm sorry, I forgot the guy's name, but it was before Nero. And technically the Jewish people did not have the legal right to do this, but they were doing it anyway because there was so much turmoil in Rome at that time that they could get away with it. And they were trying to stomp out Christianity then and there. They were trying to get rid of it. And Saul was one of the leaders of this. Think about that. That's all this guy did. Now, he was a brilliant man. He was very intelligent. This was his goal in life, was to stamp out Christianity. This is all he wanted to do. I mean, he's going to the leaders, of the Jewish population and say, I want papers to drag these people in. We're going to stop this. Paul was a very well-educated man. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He knew the law inside and out. We're going to begin with his qualifications here. I'm going to get to why he's one of my heroes. Philippians 3:4-6. Though I myself have reasons for such confidence, if someone else thinks he has reason to put confidence in flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews. In regards to the law, a Pharisee. As for zeal, persecuting the church. As for righteousness, based on the law, faultless. And what he's talking about, that last line there, with regards to the law of faultless, he was from a pure line. His parents were Hebrew on both sides. There was no Gentile in his blood. He was 100% of Jewish descent from the tribe of Benjamin. It's pretty interesting that even though they lived outside of Jerusalem, they were still devout Jewish people. They were what they called diaspora or diasporic. They actually lived outside of Jerusalem, but they kept their religion, they kept their values, and they stuck to Jewish tradition. In Tarsus, which is the southern part of Turkey, and Cilicia, we'll get there, right? People of that region were not necessarily, even though it was part of the Roman Empire, were not necessarily made Roman citizens. At that time, when Paul was born in that area, Jewish people had to be affluent, maybe not rich, but they had to be affluent, well-to-do, or of some value to the Roman Empire to become citizens. And they were made citizens, even though that was not one of the areas where it was just a given. It was not just an automatic thing. He was educated under Gamaliel. Say that 3 times fast. I had to practice that a lot to get that right. I've read it a million times, and I had to practice that for a couple of days. He was educated under Gamaliel, which was one of the religious elite at the time that Stephen was stoned, and he was right there when it happened. Faultless under the law talks about not just his life, but his lineage, where he came from. He was very proud of his lineage and his Jewish heritage and his Jewish family. And they stuck to the law, and they did not vary from that. He was devout in what he believed. Paul was not a direct witness to Christ's life. He was born about 6 to 10 years after Christ. And he did not get to see Christ or hear his teachings or see his crucifixion. But his conversion, I believe, was much more in your face and personal. You know, I mean, you think about what happened to him, right? Amen. Struck blind on the Damascus Road. He's got those papers. He's going to get some people and drag them to Jerusalem so that they could be stoned like Stephen. Acts 9, 3 through 6. As he neared Damascus on the journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell on the ground, heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, who you are persecuting." He replied, "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what to do." Imagine that. Now, my personal conversion was a little bit different, and it took me a long time to catch on. But God raised me up out of addiction, and it was one prayer. But as time's gone on, it's become more and more profound to me just how much He changed me and what He had done for me. But anyway, moving on. Before I came to this church, did any of you know me? None of you, right? One person. In 2000, I think it was late 2012, I did a fundraiser for Sam. Or when I say I, me and a bunch of other bikers, we got together, we raised a couple $1,000 and we brought it up here to Sam. And that's when I actually personally met him and met the Remnant Sons. That's how I ended up with the Remnant Sons. But that's another story altogether. But the point I'm making is I was actually up here about, we're talking maybe 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, and was up here for the whole weekend in Johnstown. And none of you knew me before. None of you. We live in the Facebook age where you know people in other countries, in other time zones, in other hemispheres. But none of you guys knew me, right? I drove 100 miles to get here today. And it's almost exactly 100 miles. Paul was in Jerusalem, and he was spending a lot of time. That's where he spent, the first part of this whole persecution thing. 135 miles away in Damascus. They knew who he was, and they were afraid of him. Right? They didn't have internet. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't have Facebook. Right? 135 miles on foot. Do you know how long that takes? The average person? That's a week. On foot. If you didn't have to carry your food, your water, and your belongings with you, you might be able to cut that down to 5 days if you're in really good shape. But you're talking a minimum of a week on foot. And they knew who this man was by his reputation. That's pretty serious. You know, I mean, you're messing some people up when people a week away know who you are. I messed up some people in my life, and y'all didn't know who I was before I came here. Obviously, I wasn't as bad as I thought I was. You guys never heard of me. He had been sent, Paul, while he was blind, while he was struck blind. He was sent to be helped by a man named Ananias in Damascus, 135 miles away from where he began his journey. In Acts 9:13-15, Lord, Ananias answered, I have heard many reports about this man and all the harm he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem. And he has come here with authority from the chief priest to arrest all who call on your name. But the Lord said to Ananias, Go. This man is my chosen instrument to proclaim to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. After his conversion, he did not go directly into ministry. Paul got healed while he was in Damascus, and Ananias laid hands on him and prayed over him, and he got healed, and he was told what to do. He went to Arabia for 3 years, and I believe that's where he got time to figure out what had happened to him. Now, a lot of times things happen to us, the Lord intervenes on our behalf, and we're so busy we don't even realize it. Right? We just, we're flying off the handle, we're moving on to the next thing. We don't even realize where God has put his hand in our life. He went to Arabia and basically just chilled, and he put it all together. He knew the law inside and out. He knew prophecy inside and out. He was a Pharisee for a reason, because he had studied, because he knew all of this stuff. And he was able to put together large pieces of the puzzle, and why the Lord had chosen him to do what he had done, or what he was going to do. And it's not clear when Paul experienced a trip to heaven, but I'm pretty sure if you've read the Bible, you understand that Paul did make a trip to heaven. He doesn't know whether it was in his flesh or in his spirit, but Paul was actually shown a vision of heaven. And this is what Paul was saying about this. 2 Corinthians 12:2-4. I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. This is Paul speaking about himself. Okay? Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. I know that this man was caught up into paradise. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And he heard things that he heard things that cannot be told, which man may not utter. I really believe that not just being struck blind, but what he was shown, whether it was during his conversion, or whether it was his 3 years in Arabia, that's not clear. I've done a bunch of reading on it. It was actually something I was taught when I was in school. They're not really sure when it happened, but it did happen. And it was very close to that period of time. Somewhere either right at the conversion or during that 3 years in Arabia. By the way, if you don't know what the third heaven is, it's not any mystery. It's not any weird kind of third dimension. The first heaven is what the birds are flying in, what the airplanes are flying in, the air we breathe. That's the first heaven. The second heaven is the stars, the heavens, where the space station is, where the rockets go, where our astronauts go. That's the second heaven. The third heaven is where God lives. We don't know that. We don't know what that's like until we get there. It's probably way beyond our imagination. We think we might have a clue. I don't think we even have the beginning inkling of a clue what that is like. And as I said, I don't know exactly when it happened, but I'm sure it was a factor in his conversion and why he was able to do what he did. And this is where we get to the part where he's my hero. He's one of my favorite heroes of the Bible. And it's because of everything he went through and what he did to bring us, what he brought us. Early on in my walk, I used to read the Bible, and I went through the whole New Testament in a couple of weeks. Really went through it. And when you read it that way, It seems like this all happened over a short period of time, but that's not the case. Paul's ministry was over 30 years. 30 years. You think about that. Now imagine if Christ came and did everything that he did, and only one person wrote it down and passed it on. Okay? Just, they wrote it down immediately afterwards, and they passed it on. Would you believe it? Think about that for a minute. One person could have wrote it all down and passed it down from generation to generation to generation. Here we are 2,000 years later. Would you believe it? Would you think it was a fiction? Would you think it was a true story? What evidence would there be to back it up? You wouldn't have anything. All you would have is one person's word against the Jewish elite, the whole Jewish community. They said it never happened. Right? They still don't believe it to this day. How much weight would it carry if one person wrote all of this stuff down and passed it on to you? What reason would you have to believe it? I mean, I could write down just about anything and hand it to you. I could write down a true story, or I could make up something and I could hand it to you. And it would be my word. And there's nothing that I could do beyond that with that kind of a delivery to make you believe it. Would you consider it a pleasant fiction? Or maybe a prophetic vision? Or maybe just a fairy tale? One person. No. We got a bunch of stuff, okay? We have a bunch of people and a bunch of stuff that happened. Moving on, anyway, Acts 9:15 through 16. The white letters are not working, by the way. It's really hard to read them. But the Lord said to Ananias, "Go, this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. And I will show him what he must suffer in my name." He was shown in advance what was going to happen to him. And he continued anyway. He did what the Lord had asked him to do, even though he was shown how much he was going to suffer. And he did suffer. Read this. Think about this for a minute. 2 Corinthians 1, 8 through 9. "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received a death sentence. But this happened so that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raised the dead." Excuse me. I'm having a little bit hard time. Sorry. "Despaired of life itself." Those are some pretty strong words. I mean, have you ever been there? Think about that. Have you ever been there? Truly been there where you just like, "Lord, take me, I'm done." I prayed that prayer nightly for a long time. He didn't let me off the hook, but I prayed that prayer nightly for a long time when I was in my active addiction. I hated my life so much, I just wanted it to be over. I prayed one prayer to be relieved of my addiction. I've been clean ever since. So I guess he had a job for me to do. Now, the time in Asia where they suffered and they were despairing of life was pretty early on in his ministry. It's not exactly clear the time frame he's talking about, but it was fairly early, most likely during his first or second ministry trip, and there were 4 of them. But the first and second ministry trips happened within the first half of his ministry. In 2 Corinthians 11, 24 through 25. "5 times I received from the Jews 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent the night and a day in the open sea." The Lord showed him how much he was going to suffer. And I bet you he showed him that too. And he still continued to do what the Lord had called him to do. And that was to share the good news and to spread the gospel. And when they stoned him so bad they thought he was dead. They left him for dead. He survived. They left him for dead. He endured a little over 30 years of this. In his last letter to Rome, he knows his time is short, and there's almost a sigh of relief in his words. In 2 Timothy 4, 6-8, "For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing." That sounds like a sigh of relief to me. I was like, all right, just about done. 30 years of that. 30 years he endured to bring us what he brought us. He wrote 13 epistles. Now, 7 of them are not disputed, 6 of them are, but when I was in school, they taught us whether he actually physically wrote it or not does not matter, because they were written either by him or by his disciples with his authority, and they had been taught by him how to write and what to write. So it's as good as from him. I don't like getting hung up on stupid little arguments. We can credit Paul with 13 letters. We know that they came from his authority and what the Lord had called him to do. So think about this for a minute. He's a religious elite. He was born to that. He was raised to that. He was pruned or raised up to be that. He was a Roman citizen in good standing, from a respected family. Though he may not have been wealthy at birth, he was definitely a man of means. He was a tent maker. We think of that, we think of, your Walmart, $100 tent, but tents were domiciles, tents were houses. People lived in these things. They had to be durable. And I promise you, they were probably pretty expensive, and one of the more expensive purchases you might make in that time and in that area. Think about that. Paul was a man of means. Paul was a man from a good family. Paul was a man that had choices. The Lord does not take away our choices. He did not take away Paul's choice. Paul had a choice in what happened to him. He could have said at any moment, "I'm not doing this." But he didn't anyway. His conversion must have been something. For him to endure everything he endured, when at any moment he could have tapped out and said, "I've had enough, I'm going back to my family, I'm tired of being beat. I'm tired of being shipwrecked. I'm tired of being hungry. I'm tired of being hungry, cold, tired, whatever." He suffered so much to spread the good news. Yet because of who he was and where he came from, he was able to deliver us such a clear picture of grace, such a clear picture of faith over works. We credit Paul with these kind of ideals. He basically explained to us what Jesus was saying to us. I believe the Lord chose him because of his education. I believe the Lord chose him because of his zealous nature. He was zealous to persecute the Christians. He turned that zealousness into spreading Christian religion. I want to go back to Gamaliel for a minute. Think about this. He was educated under this man. He was Paul's teacher. We tend to glance over this, but in Acts, they're talking about Peter and the other apostles when they were brought before the Sanhedrin. And they were basically getting ready to get dragged out of town and get stoned. And in Acts 5:38-39, this is what Gamaliel said. Therefore, in the present case, I advise you, leave these men alone. Let them go, for their purpose or activity is of human origin. For if their purpose or activity is of human origin, it will fail. But if it's from God, you will not be able to stop it. You will not be able to stop these men. You will only find yourself fighting against God. This was Paul's teacher that said that. Now, I've read that 100 times, and I started digging in to get ready for this message. Like, you know what? It kind of sounds like he's starting to believe, doesn't it? Think about that for a minute. He was intelligent enough to start seeing the prophecy fulfilled. He was intelligent enough to say, you know what? We might have some holes here that we need to look at. Now, I think he was probably dug in pretty deep to his position and his power, and I don't know why he didn't get on board with this. But thank God for Gamaliel. That was Paul's teacher. He taught Paul to think critically, and he thought critically enough that he did what he did. You know, God could do the same thing to, I don't want to single anybody out. God could have done the same exact conversion to somebody else, and they're like, I can't figure this out, I'm not smart enough for this, or I don't have the energy, or I don't have the zeal to do what you did. God picked Paul for specific reasons. So Paul's definitely one of my heroes. You know, I think about everything he endured. You know, we have people in our society right now that lie and cheat and steal, and they try to tell us all this different stuff, and they can't hold to one lie for 30 seconds, let alone 30 years, right? Why would this man endure so much if he didn't 100% believe what he believed? And you know, the other apostles, they were all martyred. All of the apostles were martyred. And they all held to what they believed. They never gave up. That's why we believe what we believe. That's why to this day, it's much easier for us to believe and to press on and to know that God is there. When Jesus came down, God in the flesh, right? Jesus was here among us so that we might know what he is really like. Not the nonsense that the religious elite were trying to teach us. It was a very immature faith, and I thank God for them. But their stiff necks made it be what it was and why people had to go through so much. I look at Paul, and he was all in. He was all in. You know, we do church on Sunday, right? How many times, and no guilt, all right? I'm not saying what I'm saying out of guilt, okay? I don't want anybody to feel guilty. I don't want anybody to have this idea that I'm pointing the finger at you. But what I want you to think about is, are you all in? Or is this something you just do on Sunday? Or maybe once or twice a week you pick up your Bible, right? Once or twice a week you do a devotion. And I'm guilty, all right? I start off every week, all right, I'm going to make sure I don't miss my devotional this week. I'm going to make sure I don't miss my prayer time this week. And by Wednesday, I'm just trying to get through the week because my job is trying to kill me, you know? Why is my job more important than my walk with Christ? Why is my job more important than spreading the word? Why is my job more important than being a light to people? I can't tell you how many times. We actually had a discussion going this morning on Facebook about Peter. And he's another one of my heroes. I don't know if I'm going to get to him in the series or not. Keep fingers crossed, and that might be here next week to do one of our heroes. I'm trying to get her. Come on! We'll kick it pants, you know. I don't have to raise my foot very high. You can tell her I said that too. I'm trying to get Annette to come in here. She has she has a few heroes of her own. But we were talking about Peter this morning, and we were talking about how Peter had denied Christ, how he had failed Christ. And there was a point in my early walk where I'm like, you know what, I'm stronger than that. I won't fail you, Lord. I'm won't do that. I will not deny you. And wow, I got my butt handed to me, big time. I had an opportunity to serve the Lord. The Lord was pressing down on me. He says, I want you to do this. And I refused. I didn't want to be uncomfortable. I didn't want to be embarrassed. The Lord was pressing down the Spirit on me and telling me to pray for somebody. But because of the situation where I was, I didn't do it. I didn't want to be embarrassed. I didn't want to feel like some kind of religious zealot or anything like that. And the Spirit was pressing down on me so hard. I'm trying to walk away from what the Lord was telling me to do, and I got to a point where I could not move. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not making this up. It was frozen. I'm standing in the travel lane of a parking lot. People are blowing the horn at me, and I'm standing there crying. I was frozen. I couldn't move my legs. Right? I'm like, I don't beat myself up over it. All right? I'm a little choked up about it, but I don't beat myself up about it because it was something that I had to learn. I don't have to be strong. I have to be strong in the Lord. I have to rely on Christ's strength. My strength is going to fail me. Right? And Paul knew that, and Peter knew that, all the apostles and all the disciples knew that, and that's how they were able to carry on. John got boiled and boiled and sent to the island of Patmos. This is like major exile, and he was tortured and beaten and never once recanted his story. Oh, to have that kind of strength, right? And oh, to do that on a daily basis. We got to get in the game. We cannot do it as a sidebar. We can't do it as an insurance policy. We're not here for fire insurance, okay? I don't believe that. Our lives were meant to be the same. Are we that in? Are we all in? Or are we just doing it? Are we just going through the motions? So let's pray.